Glory to God in the highest.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to another episode here on our Daily Inspiration, and I hope all of you will learn a lot from what we have put together in this video. And if it is not too much of a hassle for you, please do share this video on your social media to help spread the message. Anyway, I know there are a lot of non-Catholics watching the videos here, and I hope you're learning about our Catholic faith while you are here with us. With that said, what I'd like to do in this video is share something from Father Joseph Iannuzzi as he talks a little bit about First Friday's devotion here.
The fruits associated with devotion to the Sacred Heart. To Margaret Mary, Jesus revealed that whoever observes this devotion of the first 9 consecutive Fridays of the month by going to communion and receiving confession will receive 12 promises of the Sacred Heart. First, Jesus promises that he will give them all the graces and help necessary to their state in life. Now, what does that mean? Whether you're a priest, a nun, a single individual, a lay consecrated person in the world, a husband, a wife, a child, a student, whatever your state in life may be, you will receive all the grace and help necessary to be a saint. Promise number 2, he will establish and safeguard peace in their families. So if your family is not enjoying peace, consider doing the first 9 consecutive Friday devotion of the Sacred Heart. The first 9 Saturdays of the month in honor of the Sacred Heart by going to confession and communion. Third promise, he will console them in all their afflictions. Fourth promise, he will be their sure refuge in life, and above all at the hour of death. Now, this is important for people that are prepping for the end times. There are some people that are thinking ahead and providing for their children and themselves. They're thinking of the economy, the increase in taxes and food prices. So they're thinking ahead and saving and maybe cultivating some fruits and vegetables and creating a garden, and that's fine. To these people, Jesus says in the fourth promise, I will be their sure refuge in life. That's on earth. He will be their refuge. You notice what Jesus says? He will be their refuge, his Sacred Heart. And above all, he will be their refuge at the hour of death. The fifth promise, he will pour abundant blessings on all of their labors and undertakings. Number 6, sinners will find in his heart an inexhaustible source of mercy. What does that mean exactly? Sinners will find in his heart an inexhaustible source of mercy. It means that God will forgive you for your sins sacramentally through the priest, and if a priest should not be available, as in the case of the COVID lockdown, he will find other ways of forgiving you. Even the Catechism relates this. For those who cannot find a priest to sacramentally confess, there are other ways by which God forgives us. Promise number 7, lukewarm souls will become fervent with the practice of this devotion. Number 8, fervent souls will ascend rapidly to a higher perfection. Promise number 9, my blessing will remain in those places in which the image of the Sacred Heart will be displayed and venerated. Promise number 10, to all those who labor for the salvation of souls, I will give the grace to be able to convert the hardest heart. Promise 11, persons who spread this devotion will have their names written forever in my heart. I will come back to this 11th promise, very important. He will have their names forever written in his heart. And finally, promise 12, to all people who receive communion on the first Fridays of 9 consecutive months, I will grant the grace of final perseverance and of eternal salvation. So here the Lord gives us the promise of salvation by observing the first Fridays of 9 consecutive months by going to confession and communion. Similar to the promise of Our Lady of Mount Carmel when she appeared to St. Simon Stock, St. Catherine of Siena, and assured us that those who die wearing the scapular will not suffer eternal fire. They will be saved. Now, I've made, by the grace of God, the first Fridays of 9 consecutive months, and I'm doing it again. So it's not something you only have to do once. You can do it more than once. In fact, you could do it every Friday for the rest of your life. Why not? Sometimes people wonder if they have to confess the first Friday on Friday for 9 consecutive First Fridays, and then receive communion in order to obtain these 12 promises? Well, as the Church articulates, with the Feast of Divine Mercy, so with the Feast of the Sacred Heart, one confession suffices for 20 days, provided one does not commit any grave sin. So one may go to confession the Saturday before the first Friday of the Sacred Heart, I should say, before the first Friday of the month, in honor of the Sacred Heart. And that confession, the preceding Saturday, counts for that first Friday in honor of the Sacred Heart. And they have to receive communion that first Friday of the month. They have to that first Friday. But confession may be received within 20 days prior to or on the day of the first Friday of the month. So if the person who does those two things, confession, communion, first Friday of the month, they enjoy these 12 promises, indulgences, if you will.
And now for the second part of this video, I'd like to share a very beautiful story of a man cured of cancer through intercession of St. Pope John Paul II. So here's what happened. Having first been impressed by Pope John Paul in 1980, he turned to the Pope's intercession when his son was dying from cancer, and his prayers were heard. Fernando Pedro is the provincial of the Spanish province of the Order of Knights of St. John Paul II, and when his son fell ill with an aggressive form of cancer, he was terrified. He went to the hospital chapel next door and prayed through the intercession of Pope John Paul for a miracle. And then a miracle happened. His connection with John Paul II began in 1980 when he was a young man. He was active in the community at Sacred Heart Parish in Spain. Meeting the Holy Father became an experience that deepened his spiritual life and relationship with God. And the testimony of Pope John Paul II's life fascinated him so much that when the parish planned a trip to Madrid for World Youth Day, in the first days of November 1982, Fernando agreed without hesitation to co-organize the pilgrimage. And years later, Fernando started a family and eagerly awaited the birth of his son. Then in 2008, his world collapsed like a house of cards. His 20-year-old son was taken urgently to the hospital, and the doctor diagnosed the young man with third-stage cancer and gave him little chance of survival. Upon hearing the diagnosis, Fernando was terrified, and he went to the hospital's chapel next door to ask God to save him. And there was only one small holy card lying in the chapel, and it was an image of John Paul II. Fernando had previously thanked him many times for his intercession in various matters, so he thought to himself, "Why shouldn't I ask the Holy Father for a miracle of healing for our son?" As Fernando left the chapel, he took the holy card with him. He and his wife prayed day after day for their child's health. However, the miracle they were praying for didn't seem to happen as the 20-year-old's condition steadily deteriorated. His parents moved heaven and earth to help their sick son, and the doctor scheduled 16 sessions of chemotherapy for his son, and the doctor also told the parents that in the middle of the treatment process, he would do some follow-up tests to check the effectiveness of the therapy. The doctor explained to them that the medications might have to be changed because the ones they were currently using might not be effective. Before their son started chemotherapy, Fernando and his wife, along with other families from the parish, went on a pilgrimage, and they asked the Virgin Mary for the grace of health for their child. And 8 months later, Fernando received a phone call informing him that a private clinic in Madrid would provide an experimental treatment for which the 20-year-old, after a series of specialized tests, might qualify. The doctors conducted detailed tests, and they had to wait several hours for their results. In Madrid, Fernando went to the hospital chapel again. At this point, he no longer prayed for his son's healing, but for him to be able to come to terms with his passing. He was already running out of hope that the tragic situation could change and that his son would overcome his terminal illness. Fernando spent the entire night in prayer. In the morning, he went to meet with the doctors and he heard from them that his son was healthy. There was no trace of the cancer, and the hospital staff explained, "His body is clean. It's as if the cancer was never there. We don't know what happened, but it's all gone." Fernando couldn't believe what had happened. From a medical point of view, there was no explanation. Fernando had no doubt that his son's healing was the result of prayer through the intercession of John Paul II. And this is what Fernando had to say about it. The doctor gave us a written report, and we started on our way home. We made the entire car trip practically in silence, crying and thanking God. It was a great Tuesday of 2009. After arriving in our city, we went directly to the parish, and before the Blessed Sacrament gave thanks once again. A few days later, we had a consultation with the doctor in charge of our son's case. I couldn't believe what I saw in the report. The result was the same as before. We were asked not to stop the treatment and to see it through to the end. Every day I prayed in front of the picture of John Paul II that I took from the hospital chapel. Fernando notified the bishop of what had happened, and the bishop in turn sent the Archbishop of Madrid all of the information about the case, and then at the Archbishop's request, 2 special committees were appointed, one medical and one theological. They analyzed the medical documents. The materials were forwarded to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints at the Vatican, and here was the response from the Holy See. We are very grateful for this excellently documented miracle through the intercession of John Paul II. We are happy, but we receive such documentation by the thousands. Although there was medical intervention, Fernando was convinced of the intercession of the Holy Father John Paul II for the healing of his son. And today, Fernando's son is an electrical engineer, and although he undergoes yearly checkups at the clinic, he's perfectly healthy. For Fernando, on the other hand, Pope John Paul is still an important spiritual patron. As I shared earlier, Fernando is the provincial of the Spanish province of the Order of Knights of John Paul II. The organization was founded in 2011 as a living votive offering of gratitude for the gift of the beatification and pontificate of the beloved Holy Father John Paul II. The community is thriving in many countries around the world, including Poland, Ukraine, Canada, France, Spain, and Florida, and Fernando explains that his service, to which he devotes so much time and strength, is an expression of gratitude to God for the miracle of his son's healing. As Pope John Paul II once said, praying means giving some of your time to Christ, entrusting yourself to Him, listening silently to His word, letting Him echo in your heart. Well, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and I hope all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please don't hesitate to let us know in the comments below. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for your continuous supports, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, stay safe, stay healthy, and may God bless you.